Electric Fire Chapter 25, Casting Shadows.
I quickly handed the towel to Tom. Once I grabbed one, it was one of the darker ones. It wasn't a white, but it didn't blow. I watched Tom as he gently put Shadow on top of the towel before wrapping him in it. Shadow was bleeding. Something hit him in the side. It must have been from when the agent shot their weapon. Tom then looked back at me.
Let's go to Manny Vet Center. Isn't far from here.
I nodded as Tom picked up Shadow and headed out to the truck. I followed them out. Tom didn't have much room in the truck. He placed Shadow in the very back, still with a towel over him. He placed a blanket over him as well, just in case if there were any drones out looking for us. The drive usually doesn't feel so long. It's only about 10 or 15 minutes away, but this was a long drive to me. Well, plus Tom drove the speed limit, but he took it easy on the turns. I kept looking out the window, mainly watching the rearview mirror, fearing my only hedgehog friend was going to perish. My ears pinned against my head a bit. Then I felt Tom reach over and pat my head gently as he drove us into the parking lot of the veterinary clinic. I quickly got out after Tom had parked. I went straight to the back and climbed, and I gently moved Shadow to the side so Tom could pick him up with ease. The drive moved him toward the back of the truck by where the seats are in the front.
Careful, Sonic. Just leave him in the blanket. We don't want anyone to freak out or another hedgehog.
I nodded as Tom scooped up Shadow. I got out and followed behind Tom. I stayed beside them in the waiting room. Tom had to sign in through a sheet. Business was slow today. Lucky for us, no one was in the waiting room aside from one person. They were mainly looking at stuff that was on shelves. The pet carrier was with them. Only 3 people at vet offices here. I watched Tom hand in the paperwork when he was done. Then a few minutes later, the lady at the front desk then said,
Maddie is ready to see Shadow.
Tom went on ahead once the door opened. I followed behind to Maddie's office. This was actually the first time I've gone to her room. I know she's a vet, but I never actually saw her work. Once in the room, well, she was absent for a moment, probably to get her supplies or washing up. Tom just set Shadow down on the table and took the blanket off him. He left the towel though. Shadow was unconscious still, but he was breathing. Shadow was the only thing blocking that agent's weapon. I couldn't have been the one to have gotten shot if he wasn't standing beside me. Tom was texting someone. I didn't want to get into his business. It could have been his work, though he got off earlier. Maddie then stepped into the room. She was so surprised to see us 3 in the room, mostly surprised to see me. She ran over and hugged me.
You were back. I missed you so much, Sonic.
I just returned the hug. My ears twitched a bit. I missed you as well, pretzel lady. Maddie just smiled, then let me go after noticing Shadow.
Maddie sees her pretty bad. You got shot by the look of it.
Tom spoke up. Maddie just nodded a bit before going to him. She uncovered the towel a bit.
It's bad, but it doesn't look like it pierced a bone, but it's hard to tell at the moment.
Maddie was thinking on what the best option would be at the moment. Putting Shadow down wasn't one of the options. Mainly she was figuring out how long it would take to get the bullet out, telling by her facial expressions. Maddie then grabbed her medical supplies.
Tom, I need the smelling salts from the house for after I'm done. Can you pick a packet up for me, please?
Tom just nodded and headed out to get the salt. It's what she's done me back at her sister's home. That was after I got knocked out from an explosion. I stayed to watch Maddie work. I didn't want to leave my friend's side. I knew he wouldn't leave me if I was the one on that table instead of him. I stayed quiet, sitting in a chair. One arm was resting on the arm of the chair while the other stayed at my side. It took a while before she was done. She had to sew up the wound. Shadow had lost quite a lot of blood to me anyway, but Maddie said that he should make it. Tom found the salt in a basket above the fridge. By the time he got back, Maddie was sewing Shadow's wound up. She also put bandages over it. Tom set the salt down on the table where there was space. The table was large. Shadow barely took half of it. Maddie inspected Shadow a bit, making sure he didn't have any broken bones, along with making sure his pulse was normal, at least compared to mine. She opened the salts under Shadow's nose, and well, just as Shadow took a whiff, he was sitting up, but unlike me, he didn't run all over the place. He just sat up and looked at Maddie, Tom, and I, and was sitting beside me at the time. Shadow looked dazed as though he was unsure on where he was. Maddie stood beside Shadow as the other hedgehog tried to regain himself. I kept quiet. I know it wasn't my fault he got shot, but it still hurt knowing he could have died. Shadow was fine after he regained himself. Mainly relieved to see that it was okay, and that we made it back to Tom and Maddie. Tom and Maddie hugged him gently. It took a while before we went back to the house. Shadow and I mostly hung out in my room. He had to stay in my bed for a week or so due to the injury. I left a stack of my Flash comics beside him so he could read. I only hope that those people won't find us again. I fell asleep in the beanbag chair instead of the race car bed. It was fine though. I didn't mind sleeping on the beanbag chair. Shadow wouldn't be able to protect himself or me in this state if Gun found us. I never want to go back there. I'd rather have ended up in robotics lab rather than Gun. I know both are lousy, but I think Gun would want to dispose of me like how Eggman wanted to. Shadow had it way worse. At least one good thing came out of the lab test he had to go through, and that's the teleportation ability. Earth was beginning to feel unsafe again. I would like to stay here with Donut Lord and Pretzel Lady, but with Gun after me and my friend, seemed there was a weight that keeps getting heavier. Maybe Long Claw was right about everything. Keep running, find another place to hide in order to stay safe alone or not. I'd give anything to bring my newfound family to a safe place, but I only got 2 rings and the portals don't last very long. I know Shadow said he'd help me find a way to continue to stay, but it feels as though time is running out. I now wondered what other lies Geralt had told in order to get Gun to be so afraid of a monster that doesn't exist. Shadow doesn't seem so terrible, but now I was a monster as well to them. A day had passed since Shadow was bedridden. I was asleep still, curled up on my beanbag chair. Maddie had came into the room to check on the injury. Something surprising though happened overnight.